The mining station orbited a dead star, its metal corridors echoing with the heavy footsteps of Dragonkin workers. These were not the dragons of human mythology, but something far more terrifying. Standing 12 feet tall with scales that could deflect plasma bolts, they ruled the outer rim with iron claws and burning breath. Their empire stretched across 17 systems, built on the backs of lesser species who served as slaves, miners, and food. Cale Thorne pressed himself against the ventilation grate, watching the massive creatures below. At 15 years old, he was small even by human standards, his pale skin marked with scars from years of hiding in maintenance shafts. His parents had died when their transport ship was captured 3 years ago. The Dragonkin had kept him alive only because human children could crawl into spaces too small for their bulk. The mining operation was brutal. Dragonkin overseers cracked whips made from crystallized flame, leaving burns that never fully healed. The smaller species, Zephyrians with their blue skin and multiple arms, the insectoid Chitauri and a handful of other humans, worked until they collapsed. Those who fell were dragged away and never seen again. Cale had learned to survive by being invisible. He stole food scraps, repaired damaged equipment in exchange for protection from the more violent prisoners, and most importantly, he stayed away from the Dragonkin. They saw humans as barely more intelligent than livestock, useful only for manual labor and occasionally as entertainment in their fighting pits. But today was different. Today, Cale witnessed something that would change everything. The mining shift had just ended when alarms began blaring throughout the station. Emergency lights bathed the corridors in red as automated voices announced in the harsh Dragonkin language that a containment breach had occurred in Section 7. Kyle knew that section. Well, it was where they kept the most dangerous specimens. Creatures captured from the forbidden zones beyond civilized space. Through the grate, he watched as Dragonkin guards rushed past, their scaled faces twisted with something Cale had never seen before. Fear. These beings who considered themselves apex predators were actually afraid of something. Curiosity overrode caution. Cale dropped from the ventilation shaft and followed the guards at a distance, using his knowledge of the station's layout to take alternate routes. He arrived at Section 7 just as the first screams echoed through the air. The containment chamber had been torn open from the inside. Metal walls 3 feet thick had been shredded like paper, leaving jagged edges that still glowed with residual heat. In the center of the destruction stood a creature that defied comprehension. It looked like a dragon, but not the proud, intelligent Dragonkin. This was something primal, ancient, and utterly wild. Its scales were black as deep space, shot through with veins of silver that pulsed with inner light. It stood 20 feet tall, with wings that could span a small spacecraft when fully extended. Its eyes burned with an intelligence that seemed older than stars, and when it opened its mouth, the roar that emerged made the station's hull vibrate. The Dragonkin guards opened fire with everything they had: plasma rifles, sonic cannons, even experimental energy weapons that could melt through starship armor. Nothing touched the creature. It moved like liquid shadow flowing between the attacks with impossible grace. When it struck back, Dragonkin warriors who had conquered entire worlds died in seconds. Commander Veltar, the station's leader and one of the most feared Dragonkin in the Empire, stepped forward. His scales were deep crimson, marking him as nobility, and his size dwarfed even his own guards. He drew a weapon that hummed with contained fusion energy and spoke in the ancient tongue of his people. The creature turned toward him, and for a moment, they faced each other in silence. Then the ancient dragon spoke, its voice like grinding stone and distant thunder, using words in a language so old that even the Dragonkin had forgotten their meaning. Veltar's confidence cracked. His weapon trembled in his claws as he realized what he faced. This was not some captured beast or experimental weapon. This was one of the firstborn, the original dragons from which all Dragonkin claimed descent. They were myths, legends told to young dragonlings about the time before space travel, before civilization, when dragons ruled through pure power rather than technology. The firstborn moved with deliberate slowness, savoring the fear it had created. It approached Veltar like a hunter cornering wounded prey. The commander fired his fusion weapon point blank, the blast bright enough to temporarily blind everyone in the chamber. When the light faded, the creature stood unharmed, and Veltar's weapon had been reduced to slag. With one casual swipe of its claw, The firstborn sent the commander flying across the chamber. Veltar's body struck the wall with enough force to leave a crater, and he did not get up again. The remaining guards fled in panic, abandoning their posts and their duty. Through the station's communication system, evacuation orders began broadcasting. The proud Dragonkin, who had never retreated from any battle, were running from a single creature. Kale remained hidden in the shadows, transfixed by what he had witnessed. As the last of the guards disappeared, the firstborn turned its burning gaze toward his hiding spot. Those ancient eyes found him instantly, piercing through metal and shadow as if they were made of glass. The creature approached slowly, each step causing the deck plating to buckle under its weight. Kale knew he should run, but his legs would not obey. He was trapped, caught between terror and fascination as the most dangerous being in known space lowered its massive head to examine him. The firstborn's breath was hot against his skin, carrying scents of ozone and burnt metal. Its eyes studied him with an intelligence that seemed to peer directly into his soul. When it spoke, the words formed in Kale's mind rather than his ears, ancient and powerful beyond measure. "Small one," the voice rumbled through his thoughts. "You do not flee like the others. Why do you remain?" Kale found his voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. "I have nowhere else to go." The answer seemed to amuse the creature. Its lips pulled back, revealing teeth the size of sword blades in what might have been a smile. Honesty from one so young? How rare. The mental voice paused, considering. "And what are you called, small honest one?" "Kale Thorn," he managed to reply. "Kale Thorn," the firstborn repeated, as if tasting the name. "I am called by many titles, but you may know me as Shadowfire, last of the first brood. Enemy of the false scales who have forgotten their origins." The dragon pulled back slightly, its massive form somehow conveying curiosity. "Tell me, young Kyle, what do you know of dragons?" Kyle stared up at the massive creature, his mind struggling to process the question. What did he know of dragons? Only what every human child learned from old stories and bitter experience. "The Dragonkin rule the outer systems," he said carefully. "They're stronger than any other species, and they've conquered worlds across 17 sectors." Shadowfire's mental laughter was like distant thunder. "The Dragonkin," the ancient being said with obvious disdain, "are pretenders wearing the shape of true dragons. They have forgotten what it means to be dragonborn." The creature's silver-veined scales pulsed brighter. "They build their power on technology and fear, not on the ancient bonds that once made dragons masters of the cosmos." The evacuation alarms continued to wail as Shadowfire moved through the damaged chamber, examining the weapons that had failed to harm him. These false scales believe plasma and metal make them strong. They have lost the old ways, the connections that link dragon to dragon, and dragon to the universe itself. Kale found himself following the creature, though he maintained a respectful distance. "What old ways?" "The binding," Shadowfire explained, his mental voice taking on the cadence of ancient teaching. "Long ago, before your species walked upright, before the Dragonkin corrupted themselves with machines, true dragons formed sacred partnerships. We chose worthy companions, beings who complemented our power and shared our dreams of flight among the stars." The dragon's massive head turned toward Kale. "But such bonds required mutual respect, mutual trust. The companion must be brave enough to stand beside a dragon in battle, wise enough to counsel them in peace, and strong enough in spirit to match their dragon's heart." "The Dragonkin never formed such bonds," Kale observed, remembering years of watching their brutal hierarchy. "They fear them," Shadowfire confirmed. "A true bond would require the dragon to see their companion as an equal, something the false scale's pride cannot accept. So they chose domination over partnership, slaves over allies." Through the station's shattered viewports, escape pods could be seen fleeing into space like scared insects. The Dragonkin were abandoning the mining station entirely, leaving behind equipment worth more than most planets' annual budgets. Their fear of a single firstborn was absolute. "Where will you go now?" Kyle asked. The question surprised him. He should have been planning his own escape, not worrying about the creature that had terrified an entire station into retreat. Shadowfire studied him with those burning eyes. "That depends, young Kale. I have been imprisoned for 3 centuries, held in stasis while the false scales studied my genetics, seeking to unlock the secrets of the firstborn. Now I am free, but the universe has changed. My kind are gone. The old alliances are broken, and the Dragonkin Empire spreads like a plague across the stars. The dragon moved to the chamber's destroyed wall, gazing out at the cosmos beyond. I could hunt them, certainly. One by one, I could burn their fleets and shatter their worlds. But such a war would take millennia, and in the end I would be alone among the ashes. Or, Kale sensed there was another option. Or I could do what no dragon has done for 1,000 years, Shadowfire said, turning back to face him. I could forge a new binding, train a companion in the old ways, and together we could restore the true order to this corrupted galaxy. The implications of those words sent chills down Kale's spine. You're talking about choosing a partner, a human partner. The Dragonkin see humans as weak because they measure only physical strength, Shadowfire explained. But I have watched your species through my captivity. Humans possess something the false scales have lost, the ability to adapt, to grow beyond their limitations, to become more than they were born to be. The dragon's mental voice grew more intense. A human bonded to a firstborn would gain abilities beyond imagination. Enhanced strength, regenerative healing, the power to understand and speak with any sentient being, and most importantly, the ability to touch the cosmic forces that true dragons command. Kale's practical mind immediately grasped the impossibility of what was being suggested. But I'm nobody. I'm an orphaned slave who hides in ventilation shafts. The Dragonkin kept me alive because I'm small enough to crawl through their machinery. And yet, Shadowfire observed, when faced with the most dangerous creature in the galaxy, you did not run. When offered conversation with a being that had just slaughtered a dozen armed warriors, you chose honesty over flattery. When you should be planning your escape from this station, you ask about my welfare. The dragon lowered his massive head until he was eye level with Kale. The old tests for choosing a companion were not about strength or status, young one. They were about character. Through the station's communication system, automated systems announced that life support would be shutting down in phases as the skeleton crew prepared for complete evacuation. Soon the mining station would be a dead hulk orbiting its cold star. What would such a bond mean? Kale asked, surprising himself with the question. He should have been asking how to get off the station, not contemplating an alliance with a creature that could end his life with a thought. Everything, Shadowfire replied simply. A true binding changes both participants forever. I would share my power, my knowledge, my very essence with you. In return, you would become my anchor to this universe, my connection to the shorter-lived species who adapt and change in ways dragons cannot. The dragon's scales rippled with anticipation. Together, we would be capable of feats impossible for either alone. But the bond once formed cannot be broken except by death. You would be linked to me for the remainder of your natural lifespan, and possibly beyond. Kyle thought of his life so far, years of hiding, scrounging for food, watching friends disappear into the Dragonkin fighting pits or worse. He thought of the countless human settlements he'd heard about, colonies reduced to slave labor camps under Dragonkin rule. He thought of species driven to extinction for the crime of resisting conquest. If I agreed, he said slowly, could we really make a difference? Could we actually challenge the Dragonkin Empire? Shadowfire's mental laughter was fierce with joy. Child, I am the last of the firstborn, keeper of secrets the false scales have forgotten. With a true companion at my side, I could teach the universe to remember why dragons were once feared and respected across every star. The dragon straightened to his full height, wings spreading slightly in an impressive display. But I will not force this choice upon you. The old ways require consent, freely given. You may leave this station on one of the remaining evacuation shuttles. Find your way to a human colony, and live whatever life awaits you there. Outside, the last of the emergency lights were switching off as automated systems began their shutdown sequence. Time was running short for any decision. Or, Shadowfire continued, his mental voice dropping to barely a whisper, you can choose to stand with me against an empire that sees your species as livestock. You can help me teach the galaxy that true strength comes not from conquest, but from bonds forged in mutual respect and shared purpose. Kale looked up at the ancient dragon, seeing not a monster but a being who had been alone for centuries, the last of his kind in a universe that had forgotten what dragons truly were. His decision surprised even himself. I choose the bond, he said firmly. Teach me what it means to be a dragon's companion. Shadowfire regarded Kale with something approaching approval. his ancient eyes reflecting depths of wisdom and power accumulated over millennia. Spoken with true courage, young companion. But understand this. The binding is not a ceremony of words or symbolic gestures. It is a melding of souls that will transform you in ways you cannot imagine. The dragon moved to the center of the ruined chamber, his massive form seeming to gather shadows around himself. The process is dangerous. Some who attempted the binding in ancient times died from the shock of contact with dragonfire essence. Others survived but were forever changed, becoming something between human and dragon, belonging fully to neither world. Kyle felt a flicker of doubt but pushed it aside. What happens if I survive unchanged? Impossible, Shadowfire replied with certainty. If the binding succeeds, you will gain abilities your species has never possessed. Your body will become stronger, faster, more resilient. Your mind will expand to encompass knowledge and memories stretching back thousands of years. Most importantly, you will be able to channel the cosmic forces that flow through all true dragons. The evacuation alarms had fallen silent now, leaving only the hum of failing life support systems. The station was dying around them, but neither Kale nor Shadowfire seemed concerned about such mundane matters as oxygen or heat. How do we begin? Kale asked. Shadowfire extended one massive claw pointing to a space directly in front of him. Sit here and do not move no matter what you experience. The dragonfire must examine every part of your being, body, mind, and spirit. If it finds you worthy, the binding will commence. If not, I die, Kale finished, perhaps. Or perhaps you simply remain human, and we part ways as friends rather than bonded companions. Kale walked to the indicated spot and sat cross-legged on the cold metal deck. The position reminded him of meditation exercises his mother had taught him years ago, before the Dragonkin captured their transport ship. He closed his eyes and tried to center himself, preparing for whatever was to come. Do not resist what you feel, Shadowfire instructed. The dragonfire will seem invasive, overwhelming. Let it flow through you. Accept its presence even if it brings pain. The dragon began to change. His scales, already pulsing with silver light, now blazed like captured starlight. The veins of energy running through his hide grew brighter, and the air around him began to shimmer with heat that had nothing to do with temperature. This was the fire of creation itself, the cosmic force that had shaped stars and birthed civilizations. Kyle felt it before he saw it, a presence touching the edges of his consciousness like a gentle inquiry. Then the gentleness vanished, replaced by a torrent of energy that crashed into his mind with the force of a solar storm. Every nerve in his body screamed as the dragonfire examined him, testing his memories, his fears, his deepest hopes and darkest secrets. Images flashed through his awareness, his parents' faces as Dragonkin guards dragged them away, years of hiding in maintenance shafts while friends disappeared, moments of kindness shared with other prisoners in the darkest times, his desperate dreams of freedom not just for himself, but for all the enslaved species suffering under Dragonkin rule. The fire found his anger at injustice, his compassion for the weak, his stubborn refusal to surrender hope even in the bleakest circumstances. It tested his courage by showing him visions of possible futures, himself standing against armies of Dragonkin warriors, facing weapons that could crack planets, staring into the void between stars with only his bond to Shadowfire keeping him alive. Through it all, Kale held firm. The pain was extraordinary, like being simultaneously burned and frozen while electricity coursed through his veins. But he did not cry out. He accepted it, embraced it, let it transform him rather than fighting against the change. Then something shifted. The invasive presence became familiar, welcome. Kale realized he was no longer experiencing the dragon fire alone. Shadowfire was there with him, sharing the ordeal, lending his strength to help Kyle endure the transformation. Together, they sank deeper into the cosmic forces that connected all things. Kale saw the universe as dragons saw it, not empty space between distant lights, but a living web of energy that could be shaped by will and wisdom. He felt the pull of gravity wells around massive stars, sensed the birth cries of new worlds, touched the ancient networks of power that the Firstborn had used to travel between galaxies. When the fire receded, Kale opened eyes that now glowed with inner light. His human appearance remained largely unchanged, but subtle differences marked his transformation. His muscles were denser, his reflexes enhanced beyond normal human limits. Most significantly, he could feel Shadowfire's presence in his mind not as an intrusion, but as a natural extension of his own consciousness. "It is done," Shadowfire said, both aloud and through their new mental link. "You are the first human in recorded history to survive a true dragon binding." Kale stood, marveling at how different his body felt. He was still recognizably himself, but stronger, more coordinated, filled with energy that seemed inexhaustible. "What happens now?" "Now you learn," Shadowfire replied. "The binding has given you potential, but skill comes only through practice. You must master the abilities the Dragonfire has awakened, understand the knowledge I have shared with you, and prepare for the war we will wage against the false scales." Through their mental connection, Kale felt the dragon's excitement at having a companion after centuries of solitude. But he also sensed deeper currents: Shadowfire's grief for his extinct species, his determination to restore balance to a corrupted galaxy, and his fierce protective instincts toward his new bondmate. "The Dragonkin will not ignore what happened here," Shadowfire continued. "When they realize that a firstborn has escaped and bonded with a human, they will respond with overwhelming force. We must be ready." The mining station shuddered around them as its orbit began to decay without proper maintenance. Soon it would spiral into the dead star it orbited, taking all evidence of their meeting with it. "Where will we go?" Kale asked, though part of him already knew the answer through their shared consciousness. "To the places the false scales fear to tread," Shadowfire replied. "To forgotten worlds where ancient weapons sleep, to the graveyards of extinct civilizations, to the hidden sanctuaries where remnants of the old alliances might yet survive." The dragon moved toward the chamber's destroyed wall, his massive form somehow graceful despite its size. "But first we must escape this dying station. Are you prepared for your first flight among the stars, young companion?" Kale joined him at the breach in the station's hull, looking out at the cosmos beyond. The dead star below them pulsed with dim energy, surrounded by the debris of worlds consumed in its final death throes. In the distance, the lights of fleeing Dragonkin ships grew smaller as they retreated to what they imagined was safety. "I've never flown before," Kale admitted. Shadowfire's mental laughter was warm with affection. "Then today you will learn what it truly means to be dragonborn. Hold tight to our bond, trust in the fire within you, and prepare to soar." The ancient dragon gathered himself, muscles coiling with power. Energy crackled along his scales as he prepared to leap into the void, carrying his human companion into a universe that would never be the same again. The sensation of flying through space without a ship defied every law of physics Kale thought he understood. Shadowfire's wings beat against stellar wind and cosmic radiation, somehow generating thrust in the vacuum, while an envelope of dragonfire protected them both from the cold embrace of space. Through their bond, Kyle felt the ancient creature's joy at being free after centuries of captivity. Soaring once again through the starfields he had claimed as his domain long before the Dragonkin Empire existed. They traveled for days, passing through nebulae that painted Shadowfire's scales in brilliant colors, and diving close to young stars whose nuclear fury felt like a warm bath to the firstborn's energy-based metabolism. Kale learned to navigate by reading cosmic currents, to sense the gravitational signatures of planets and asteroid fields, and to understand the subtle differences between natural stellar phenomena and the energy signatures of advanced civilizations. Their destination was a system the Dragonkin had marked as forbidden, 3 dead worlds orbiting a binary pulsar. According to official records, an expedition had vanished there 50 years ago, and subsequent surveys had detected dangerous radiation levels that made the system unsuitable for colonization. But through Shadowfire's ancient memories, Kale learned the truth. This was once called Cathara Prime, the dragon explained as they approached the outermost planet. It was the greatest stronghold of the Alliance of Talons, where dragons and their bonded companions ruled justly for 10,000 years. The world below them showed clear signs of catastrophic warfare. Crystallized glass plains stretched between crater lakes where cities had once stood. Mountain ranges had been carved into defensive positions, their peaks melted and reformed by weapons capable of reshaping continents. Most telling were the massive bone formations scattered across the landscape, the skeletons of dragons who had died fighting a last desperate battle against overwhelming odds. "What happened here?" Kale asked, though he dreaded the answer. "The false scales happened," Shadowfire replied with bitter hatred. 2,000 years ago, when they first began building their empire, They encountered worlds where true dragons still lived in harmony with other species. Rather than learning from these examples, they saw them as threats to their doctrine of draconic supremacy. They landed near what had once been a great city. The ruins still held traces of beauty. Graceful spires designed to accommodate both flying dragons and walking humanoids. Gardens where exotic plants from 100 worlds had grown together. Artistic sculptures that captured moments of interspecies cooperation, frozen in imperishable crystal. The Alliance of Talons believed that strength came from unity. Shadowfire continued, leading Kale through the devastated streets. Dragons provided power and wisdom, while their companions contributed adaptability, creativity, and diverse perspectives. Together they created a civilization that spanned 3 galaxies and brought peace to countless worlds. They stopped before a massive structure that had somehow survived the destruction largely intact. Built from black stone veined with the same silver energy that ran through Shadowfire's scales, it radiated an aura of ancient power that made Kale's enhanced senses tingle with recognition. "This is why we came here," Shadowfire explained. "The heart of Kithera, the central repository of Alliance knowledge and weapons. If it still functions after all these years, we may find what we need to challenge the false scales on equal terms." The entrance was sealed by barriers that would have stopped any conventional army, but Shadowfire's dragonfire passed through them like they were made of mist. Inside, the structure was a maze of chambers and corridors that seemed to extend far deeper into the planet's crust than should have been possible. Emergency lighting activated at their approach, powered by energy sources that had somehow remained functional for 2 millennia. The walls were covered with displays showing star charts, battle plans, and technical schematics for devices whose purposes Kale could only guess at. The Alliance fought the Dragonkin for 300 years, Shadowfire explained as they walked deeper into the complex. In the beginning, they thought diplomacy might succeed. They sent envoys offering to share their knowledge, to teach the false scales the proper ways of dragon civilization. "I assume that didn't work," Kale observed, studying a tactical display that showed the progressive fall of Alliance worlds. The Dragonkin responded by executing the envoys and declaring war on any dragon who consorted with lesser species. Shadowfire confirmed. They could not accept that their pure-blood supremacist ideology was flawed, that cooperation might achieve more than conquest. They reached the central chamber, a vast spherical space where thousands of data crystals floated in complex orbital patterns around a core of condensed starlight. This was the collective memory of an entire civilization, preserved against the day when someone might come seeking the wisdom of the past. "How do we access it?" Kale asked. "Together," Shadowfire replied. The Alliance systems were designed to require both dragon and companion to operate. They knew that neither perspective alone could encompass the full truth. They approached the central console, an elegant curve of living metal that adapted to accommodate both Shadowfire's massive claws and Kale's human hands. When they touched it simultaneously, the chamber came alive with holographic displays showing the Alliance's greatest achievements and darkest hours. Kyle watched in fascination as images flowed past. Dragons and their companions exploring uncharted nebulae, peaceful first contacts with newly spacefaring species, the construction of great space habitats where dozens of races lived and worked together. Then came the darker scenes. Dragonkin fleets burning Alliance colonies, desperate evacuations of civilian populations, last stands where bonded pairs fought impossible odds to buy time for refugees to escape. The Alliance developed weapons the Dragonkin couldn't counter, Shadowfire noted as they accessed military records. Harmony cannons that could disrupt the neural patterns of unbound dragons. Resonance shields that turned the false scale's own aggression against them. Even stellar manipulation devices that could trigger supernovae and enemy-held systems. But they still lost, Kale observed. "Numbers," Shadowfire said simply. The Alliance controlled perhaps 50 systems at its height. The Dragonkin Empire had already conquered 300 worlds and could replace their losses faster than we could inflict them. In the end, overwhelming force prevailed over superior technology and tactics. The database contained detailed specifications for Alliance weapons and defensive systems, all of which required materials and manufacturing capabilities far beyond what Kale and Shadowfire could access on their own. But buried deeper in the archives, they found something more promising. Intelligence reports on Dragonkin weaknesses and internal conflicts. "Look at this," Kyle said, highlighting a series of communications intercepts. The Dragonkin weren't united even during their war against the Alliance. Different clan fleets competed for territory and resources, sometimes fighting each other instead of their declared enemies. Shadowfire studied the data with growing excitement. These patterns may still exist. The False Scales Empire grew too large too quickly. They rule through fear and force, but such systems are inherently unstable. They spent hours downloading critical information into portable storage crystals, selecting the most useful weapon schematics, tactical doctrines, and intelligence about Dragonkin society. But the most valuable discovery was a complete list of Alliance safehouses, hidden bases, and emergency supply caches scattered throughout the galaxy. Many of these will have been discovered and destroyed over the centuries, Shadowfire warned as they prepared to leave. But if even a few remain functional, we will have the resources to begin our campaign properly. As they prepared to depart Cathara Prime, Kale took one last look at the ruined city. Why did the Alliance lose? They had better technology, better tactics, and they were fighting for something worth preserving. They lost because they were honorable, Shadowfire replied sadly. They tried to minimize civilian casualties, to preserve culture and knowledge even when waging total war. The False Scales had no such limitations. They practiced genocide as a matter of policy, destroyed entire worlds to deny them to their enemies, and corrupted or killed any dragon who showed signs of developing bonds with other species. They launched back into space, their destination one of the Alliance supply caches whose location was embedded in the crystal data they carried. But as they left the dead system behind, both knew they were being followed. 3 Dragonkin scout ships had been tracking them since they entered the Forbidden Zone, maintaining distance while reporting their position to the fleet commanders. The hunt for the escaped firstborn and his impossible human companion had begun in earnest. They mean to capture us alive, Shadowfire observed, reading the energy signatures of their pursuers' weapons. Stunning rather than killing weapons, boarding pods instead of assault missiles. They want to study our bond, to understand how a human survived the binding. Can we outrun them? Kale asked. Shadowfire's mental laughter was fierce with anticipation. Young companion, you have much to learn about dragon warfare. We do not run from 3 ships. We show them why their ancestors, the Ansi, used to wake screaming from nightmares about the firstborn. The ancient dragon folded his wings and dove toward the scout ships like a falling star. Kale held secure in the envelope of dragonfire that surrounded them both. It was time for their first real battle together, and the galaxy was about to remember what true dragons were capable of when they fought with purpose and unity. The first Dragonkin scout ship never saw them coming. Shadowfire materialized from the cosmic background radiation like a nightmare-given form, his black scales absorbing sensor sweeps while the silver veins running through his hide remained dormant until the moment of attack. When he struck, it was with the accumulated fury of centuries of imprisonment and the precise knowledge of Dragonkin vessel design flaws. His claws, superheated to plasma temperatures by dragonfire, punched through the scout ship's armored hull as if it were made of paper. The vessel's fusion reactor detonated in a brief star of destruction that painted the surrounding space in brilliant orange light. Through their mental link, Kale felt Shadowfire's grim satisfaction at the clean kill, but also his sadness at having to destroy what had once been his own kind. The second ship managed to launch a distress beacon before Shadowfire reached it, but the signal would take hours to reach the nearest Dragonkin fleet. The scout's captain, a young Dragonkin warrior named Thexvar, tried desperately to bring his weapons to bear on the ancient dragon, but conventional plasma cannons were useless against a firstborn's natural defenses. Surrender. False scale. Shadowfire's voice boomed across all communication frequencies. Your death accomplishes nothing, but your surrender might teach you wisdom. I serve the Emperor Dragon Velthak, Thexvar replied, his voice cracking with fear and defiance. I will not yield to a rogue and his pet human. The insult sparked anger through the bond Kale shared with Shadowfire, but it was his own fury that surprised him. The casual dismissal of their partnership, the assumption that he was merely a pet rather than an equal companion, touched something deep and primal in his transformed psyche. Let me handle this one, Kyle said through their mental link. Shadowfire's surprise rippled through their bond, but he trusted his companion's instincts. The ancient dragon pulled back, allowing Kale to step forward within the protective envelope of dragonfire that surrounded them both. Captain Thexvar, Kale called out, his voice carrying across space through the communication system Shadowfire's power made possible. You serve an empire built on lies. Your Emperor Dragon has never formed a true bond, never experienced the unity that makes dragons strong. He rules through fear because he cannot inspire loyalty. Silence, human scum, Thexvar snarled. You know nothing of dragon honor. I know that your crew is already dead, Kale replied calmly. Through his enhanced senses, he could detect the radiation leaking from the scout ship's damaged hull, the failing life support systems, the fear scent emanating from the bridge. Your ship is dying around you. Your weapons cannot harm us, and your distress beacon will bring help too late to save you. The truth of those words was undeniable, and Thexvar's defiance wavered. What do you want? Information, Kale said. Tell us about the Dragonkin fleet movements in this sector, and we'll transfer you to an escape pod with enough supplies to reach a friendly system. Through their bond, Shadowfire conveyed approval of the strategy. Rather than simply destroying all opposition, they were offering the chance for honor without death, the possibility of learning from defeat rather than being consumed by it. But Thexvar's conditioning ran too deep. I would rather die than betray the Empire to a human and his beast. The scout ship's remaining weapons fired in a final desperate salvo. Shadowfire deflected the plasma bolts casually, but Kale felt the young Dragonkin's genuine belief in his cause, his willingness to die for principles he thought were noble. It was tragic and admirable and utterly pointless. The ship's reactor overloaded moments later, adding another brief star to the cosmic graveyard around them. The third scout vessel had been watching this exchange from a careful distance, its captain apparently possessed of more wisdom than his comrades. When Shadowfire and Kale approached, the ship's weapons remained powered down, and its communication array opened on standard diplomatic frequencies. I am ship leader Care Most of the clan Veltharix, a gravelly voice announced. I have witnessed the destruction of my squadron and the unusual nature of your partnership. I request parley under the ancient codes. Shadowfire's mental voice carried surprise and a faint hope. He invokes the old laws, the ones that predate the Empire. This one may be worth speaking with. They drew alongside the scout ship, close enough that Kermost could see them clearly through his vessel's viewports. The ship leader was older than his dead comrades, his crimson scales marked with the silver tracery that indicated high rank and advanced age. His eyes held intelligence and a weariness that spoke of too many years serving a cause he had begun to question. You are firstborn, Kermost said, and it was not a question. I thought your kind extinct. As did I until recently, Shadowfire replied. I am the last, or so I believe. But with my human companion, I am no longer alone. Kermost studied Kale with obvious fascination. A true bond? Not domination or slavery, but the partnership the ancient texts describe? Yes, Kale answered for himself. We are equals, united by choice and mutual respect. The old Dragonkin was silent for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. I have served the Empire for 2 centuries, he finally said. I have conquered worlds and enslaved species in the name of draconic supremacy. But lately, I have begun to wonder if we have lost something essential in our rise to power. You have lost everything essential, Shadowfire said bluntly. Honor, wisdom, the connections that made our ancestors great. The Empire is a cancer that has consumed the dragon spirit and replaced it with hollow pride. Strong words, Kermost observed. Words that would earn a death sentence if spoken in imperial space. But here, in the shadow of a dead alliance world, they ring with uncomfortable truth. Through their bond, Kale sensed an opportunity. This Dragonkin was already questioning his loyalty to the Empire, already seeing the contradictions in their supremacist doctrine. Perhaps he could be turned into an ally rather than an enemy. You could come with us, Kale offered, surprising both dragons. Learn what we've learned. See what the Empire really is when viewed from outside its propaganda. Kermost's surprise was evident. You would trust me? A warrior who has spent his life enforcing the very system you seek to destroy? Trust is built through actions, not bloodline, Kale replied. But understanding must start somewhere. If you're willing to question the Empire, you're already further along the path to wisdom than most of your kind. Shadowfire added his own voice to the invitation. The ancient codes you invoked spoke of redemption through service to a greater cause. Help us restore balance to the galaxy, and perhaps the sins of your past can be balanced by the good you do in the future. The offer hung in space between them, a moment of possibility in a universe that had known too much hatred and violence. Karamose looked at his instruments, showing the approach of a massive Dragonkin battle fleet drawn by the distress beacons of his destroyed comrades. "If I join you, I become a traitor to everything I have served," he said slowly. "If you don't," Cal pointed out, "you remain a slave to a system that values conquest over honor, dominance over partnership. The choice is yours, but choose quickly. We need to be gone before that fleet arrives." Kermost made his decision with the same crisp efficiency that had made him a successful military commander. "Computer, begin data purge of all navigation logs and communication records. Set reactor for overload on my command." He turned back to face them. "I choose redemption, whatever the cost." Within minutes, they had transferred Keramos to Shadowfire's protective envelope, leaving his ship to explode and cover their escape route. The old Dragonkin adapted to dragonflight with remarkable grace, his own connection to the cosmic forces that powered such travel still strong, despite centuries of relying on mechanical transportation. As they fled toward their next destination, now a trio instead of a pair, Cal reflected on how much had changed since he had been a slave hiding in ventilation shafts. The galaxy was vast and the Dragonkin Empire seemed unshakable, but they had made a beginning. One dragon at a time, one world at a time. They would show the universe that there was another way. Behind them, the arriving battle fleet found only debris and questions. The hunt for the bonded pair had become more complicated, but also more urgent. Word would spread through the Empire that a firstborn lived, that he had bonded with a human, and that even loyal Dragonkin could be turned against their own kind. The revolution had begun. The Alliance supply cache was hidden within a rogue planet, a world ejected from its solar system eons ago, and now drifting through interstellar space. From the outside, it appeared to be nothing more than a frozen rock covered in methane ice. But Shadowfire's ancient memories revealed the truth. Beneath kilometers of accumulated cosmic debris lay a facility that had once supplied the greatest dragon civilization in galactic history. Kermost had adapted to their unusual partnership with surprising speed during their 3-day journey. The old Dragonkin warrior possessed a flexible mind beneath his military conditioning. An exposure to the mental link between Shadowfire and Kale had opened his eyes to possibilities he had never imagined. "I begin to understand why the Empire fears bonded pairs," he said as they descended. "Through the planet's thin atmosphere, the connection you share multiplies your individual strengths while eliminating your separate weaknesses. It is what we could have become if pride had not made us deaf to wisdom." The facility's entrance was sealed by technology that made Dragonkin engineering look primitive by comparison. Crystalline matrices stored information in quantum states that could survive the heat death of the universe, while energy patterns older than most stars maintained security protocols that recognized Shadowfire's genetic signature, despite the millennia that had passed. Inside, they found a treasure trove that exceeded their wildest hopes. The cache contained not just weapons and supplies, but complete manufacturing systems capable of producing Alliance technology. Most importantly, it held detailed records of other hidden sites throughout the galaxy, many of which had gone undetected by the Dragonkin Empire. "This changes everything," Kale said as they explored the facility's vast storage chambers. "With these resources, we're not just 3 individuals fighting an empire. We could rebuild the Alliance itself." But their excitement was tempered by the discovery of the facility's guardian. In the deepest chamber, they found a dragon unlike any Kyle had ever seen. Her scales were pale silver shot through with threads of gold, and her size rivaled Shadowfire's despite her obviously feminine build. Most startling of all, she was alive, sustained in a form of stasis that had preserved her for 2,000 years. "Moon Whisper," Shadowfire breathed, recognizing her even through the temporal barriers that had kept her sleeping. "I thought you died at the siege of Korath Prime." The ancient dragoness stirred as his voice reached her through the stasis field. Her eyes opened, revealing depths of amber intelligence that immediately focused on the 3 figures before her. When she spoke, her mental voice carried the authority of someone who had once commanded starfleets and shaped the policies of entire civilizations. "Shadowfire, my old friend," she said, her consciousness expanding to include Kale and Karamost in the conversation. "I had hoped you were dead rather than captured." And I see you have found interesting companions. More than companions, Shadowfire replied. Kale bears a true bond, and Karamost has renounced the false scales to serve our cause. The time for hiding is over, Moonwhisper. We are going to restore what was lost. Moonwhisper emerged from stasis with fluid grace, her massive form moving with the controlled power that marked all Firstborn. But Kale noticed subtle differences between her and Shadowfire. Where he radiated barely contained fury at the injustices he had witnessed, she projected calm calculation and strategic patience. I entered stasis when it became clear that the war was lost, she explained. My role was to preserve Alliance knowledge and resources until someone came who could use them properly. I had hoped it would be survivors from other Alliance worlds, not the last Firstborn and a human child. This human child has bonded with Dragonfire and survived, Shadowfire said with obvious pride. He has shown more wisdom in a few weeks than the Dragonkin Empire has demonstrated in 2 millennia. Moonwhisper studied Kale with the intense focus of a dragon evaluating potential. Show me this bond, she commanded. Kyle extended his consciousness through the mental link he shared with Shadowfire, allowing Moonwhisper to experience the connection directly. Her surprise was immediate and profound as she felt the depth of their union, the way human adaptability enhanced dragon wisdom while dragon power amplified human determination. Extraordinary, she murmured. The bond is deeper than anything recorded in Alliance archives. You have not merely linked with each other. You have become something new, greater than the sum of your parts. She turned her attention to Karamost, and the old Dragonkin warrior straightened under her gaze. And you, child of the false scales, what drives you to betray everything you once served? I have seen the truth of what we became, Karamost replied simply. We traded honor for power, wisdom for dominance. If there is a chance to redeem our species, I will take it regardless of the cost. Moonwhisper spent the next several hours reviewing the intelligence they had gathered, studying Dragonkin fleet movements and political structures with the eye of someone who had once fought their ancestors. Her analysis was sobering but not without hope. The Empire has grown too large to govern effectively, she concluded. Their communication networks are strained, their logistics are overstretched, and their political structure is fragmenting under the weight of competing clan interests. But they still control vast resources and millions of ships. A direct assault would be suicide. What do you suggest? Kale asked. We begin as the Alliance did originally, by offering a better way. There are species throughout the galaxy who chafe under Dragonkin rule, systems that provide resources only because they fear destruction. If we can demonstrate that the old ways still exist, that cooperation can triumph over conquest, others will join us. Moonwhisper led them to a chamber containing detailed holographic maps of the galaxy, showing political boundaries, trade routes, and strategic installations. Here, she said, highlighting a cluster of systems near the Empire's outer rim. The Zeridian Collective has been resisting Dragonkin taxation for 3 years. Their leaders are desperate enough to listen to alternatives. And here, Karamost added, pointing to another region, the mining worlds of the Corvin chain have been in almost constant revolt. The Imperial governors have requested additional troops 4 times in the past year. Perfect, Shadowfire said, his mental voice eager for action. We offer the Zeridians protection in exchange for their knowledge of local conditions. We help the Corvin miners throw off their chains. Word will spread that the Alliance has returned. But Moonwhisper held up a cautionary claw. We must be careful not to move too quickly. The Empire's response to open rebellion is always the same. Total destruction as an example to others. We need to build strength before we reveal ourselves fully. They spent days planning their campaign, identifying targets and allies while establishing secure communication networks with the other Alliance caches scattered throughout the galaxy. Many of the hidden facilities had been discovered and destroyed over the centuries, but enough remained to provide the foundation for a new rebellion. The key breakthrough came when they accessed the cache's quantum communication array, a device capable of instantaneous contact across galactic distances. Through it, they discovered that other Alliance remnants had survived. Hidden colonies of dragons and their bonded companions, underground resistance movements on conquered worlds, even a few intact military units that had been fighting a guerrilla war for 2,000 years. We are not alone, Kyle said with wonder as contact reports flooded in from across the galaxy. The Alliance never truly died. It just went into hiding. And now it awakens, Moon Whisper added. But awakening is only the beginning. The real work starts when we face the Empire in open battle. Their first target was carefully chosen, a Dragonkin supply depot on the edge of Zeridian space, lightly defended but strategically important. Its destruction would send a message while providing much-needed resources for the growing rebellion. As they prepared to leave the cache, now accompanied by automated systems that would begin producing Alliance technology, Kale felt the weight of history settling on his shoulders. He was no longer just a human who had bonded with a dragon. He was a symbol of hope for countless enslaved worlds, a living proof that the old ways could triumph over tyranny. The supply depot raid would be their public debut, the moment when the galaxy learned that the Alliance of Talons had returned. Kale only hoped they were ready for the war that would inevitably follow. The Dragonkin supply depot hung in space like a mechanical cancer, its angular architecture reflecting the Empire's philosophy of function over beauty. Massive cargo vessels arrived daily, disgorging tribute extracted from dozens of conquered worlds, rare metals, exotic foods, artistic treasures, and slaves. The depot processed these resources before shipping them deeper into Imperial space, feeding the endless hunger of an empire built on exploitation. Kyle studied the facility through enhanced senses that could analyze energy signatures and detect hidden weapon emplacements. The bond with Shadowfire had continued to evolve during their weeks of preparation, granting him abilities that seemed to expand daily. He could see the fear scent emanating from enslaved workers, feel the electrical patterns of the station's defensive systems, even sense the emotional states of individual Dragonkin guards. 37 warships, he reported to his companions. Mix of cruisers and escort fighters, all powered down in docking bays. The main defensive grid has plasma cannons and particle beam arrays, but they're configured for large-scale threats. They won't be able to track fast-moving individual targets effectively. Moon Whisper floated beside them in the darkness between stars, her silver scales nearly invisible against the cosmic background. The cargo holds contain approximately 2,000 slaves from 17 different species. Rescue will be as important as destruction. Agreed, Shadowfire said. But we must ensure that our message is clear. This attack marks the return of the Alliance, not simple piracy or terrorism. Kermost had spent the journey contacting underground resistance cells throughout the region, using his knowledge of Imperial communication codes to reach sympathizers within the Dragonkin military hierarchy. I have confirmations from 3 separate groups. They're ready to act when we give the signal. The plan they had developed was complex but elegant. Rather than simply destroying the depot, they would liberate its slaves, capture its resources, and broadcast a message to the galaxy announcing the Alliance's return. Most importantly, they would offer the facility's Dragonkin personnel the same choice. Kermost had faced, join the rebellion or face the consequences of continued service to tyranny. Kale felt a familiar flutter of anxiety as they prepared for battle. Despite his enhanced abilities and the constant presence of Shadowfire in his mind, he was still essentially a teenager facing military forces that had conquered star systems. But alongside the fear ran excitement and determination. This was what he had been transformed for, what their bond was meant to achieve. Remember, Moon Whisper said as they began their approach, we are not just fighting the Empire. We are showing the galaxy what dragons can become when they embrace partnership instead of domination. They struck without warning, emerging from hyperspace at point-blank range, where the depot's sensors couldn't track them effectively. Shadowfire and Moon Whisper moved like living weapons, their dragon fire disrupting electronic systems and their physical power tearing through armored bulkheads. But it was their coordination with their companions that truly demonstrated the Alliance way. Kale found himself moving with inhuman speed and precision, his enhanced reflexes allowing him to anticipate and counter Dragonkin defensive measures. Through his bond with Shadowfire, he could coordinate attacks with perfect timing, striking critical systems while the ancient dragon drew enemy fire. More importantly, he could sense the fear and confusion of the depot's slaves, guiding rescue efforts to where they were most needed. The facility's commander, a massive Dragonkin named Sekthron, rallied his forces for a desperate defense of the main control center. His warriors fought with the savage efficiency that had conquered hundreds of worlds, but they had never faced opponents who combined dragon power with strategic intelligence and moral purpose. You cannot win. Sekthron roared as his defenses crumbled around him. The Empire spans half the galaxy. We will hunt you to the ends of space. Your empire is built on fear and lies, Kale replied, his voice carrying across the station's communication system. We offer a different path, cooperation instead of conquest, partnership instead of slavery. The battle reached its climax in the depot's central hub, where thousands of slaves waited in holding cells while Dragonkin guards prepared to execute them rather than allow their rescue. It was here that the true test of the Alliance philosophy came. Could they save lives while still achieving their military objectives? Moonwhisper provided the answer. The ancient dragoness had spent her time in stasis developing new applications of dragonfire, including techniques that could selectively disable technology without harming living beings. Her power flowed through the detention complex like silver lightning, shorting out weapons and security systems while leaving the prisoners unharmed. This is impossible, Sekthron whispered as he watched his forces collapse. Dragonfire cannot be controlled with such precision. It can when guided by wisdom instead of rage, Shadowfire replied. This is what you lost when you abandoned the old ways, the ability to use power responsibly. The depot's fall took less than 6 hours. By the time Imperial reinforcements could arrive, the station had been stripped of valuable resources. Its slaves had been evacuated to hidden Alliance bases, and its Dragonkin personnel faced a choice between conversion or exile. To Kale's surprise, nearly a third of the depot's dragons chose to join the rebellion. These were mostly younger warriors who had grown disillusioned with the Empire's brutality, but their defection sent shockwaves through Dragonkin society. For the first time in 2 millennia, members of the master race were openly questioning their supremacist ideology. The broadcast they transmitted as they departed carried their message to every world in the sector. Kale stood beside Shadowfire as they addressed the galaxy, no longer a hidden slave but a symbol of hope for the oppressed. People of the galaxy, he said, his words carrying across space to billions of listeners. The Alliance of Talons has returned. We offer freedom to the enslaved, partnership to the isolated, and redemption to those who have served tyranny. The age of Dragonkin domination is ending. The age of cooperation begins now. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Resistance movements that had hidden for centuries revealed themselves, offering aid and intelligence. Enslaved species began coordinating uprisings across dozens of worlds. Most significantly, dragons throughout the Empire started questioning their loyalty to rulers who demanded submission instead of inspiring it. But the Empire's response was equally swift and brutal. Emperor Dragon Velthak himself took personal command of the hunt for the traitor dragons and their pets. Massive fleets began sweeping through the Outer Rim, destroying any world suspected of harboring Alliance sympathizers. The real war begins now, Moonwhisper observed as they watched Imperial forces mobilizing across hundreds of systems. They will try to crush us before we can spread our message further. Let them come, Shadowfire replied, his mental voice carrying absolute confidence. We have something they lack: unity, purpose, and the knowledge that we fight for something greater than ourselves. Kale felt the truth of those words through their bond. The Dragonkin Empire was powerful, but it was also brittle, held together by fear rather than loyalty. The Alliance offered something the galaxy had not seen for 2,000 years: hope for a better future. Standing between his dragon companion and the ancient dragoness who had become their mentor, surrounded by former enemies who had chosen redemption over continued service to tyranny, Kyle looked out at the stars and smiled. The orphaned human slave was gone, replaced by someone who had learned what it truly meant to be dragonborn. The galaxy would never be the same again. The Alliance of Talons had returned, and this time they would not fall to those who mistook brutality for strength. Partnership would triumph over domination, cooperation would defeat conquest, and the old ways would be restored. The Age of Dragons was beginning anew.